Have you ever had one of those friendships, where it just kind of fizzles out and you realize, maybe it's because we just see the world so differently? Well, today, that's exactly what we're diving deep into, how friendships actually thrive. And surprisingly, it all boils down to values.
Values, huh? Interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Our sources for today really get into the nitty-gritty of what makes friendships tick. And one of the things they talk about is this idea of gregariousness.
Gregariousness. Okay, I'm intrigued.
Right. It's that feeling, that pull we have towards other people wanting to be social. It's almost like we're hardwired to connect, wouldn't you say?
I think there's definitely some truth to that. We are social creatures after all. But I'm curious, how do our values fit into this?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Hmm.
Because values, those deep-seated beliefs about right and wrong, what matters most, those really shape who we are at our core. So the question is, how do they affect our friendships?
I see where you're going with this. It's like, do our values make or break our friendships?
Exactly. And our sources, they actually dig into this whole idea.
Right.
For instance, they point out that, sometimes people with totally opposite personalities, they might be drawn to each other at first.
Right, like opposites attract.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But those relationships, they can be a real trial to maintain over time. It's kind of like, I don't know if you've seen, those classic odd couple movies or
Oh,
sitcoms
yeah, absolutely.
where it's like one person, they love their mess, they thrive in chaos, and the other one needs everything perfectly organized, a place for everything. Actually, our source even includes this funny picture.
A picture, what is it?
Yeah, it's like a photo of this couch.
Right.
And one side is totally spotless, and the other side looks like a tornado hit it. I think it really highlights these different values in a nutshell. What do you think?
I totally agree. That's a great visual. It really gets you thinking about those underlying differences.
Doesn't it? And it makes you wonder, what's going on beneath the surface?
Exactly. And that brings us to the core of it, right? Those different values.
Yeah. So could you break it down for us? I mean, what's the difference between, say, intrinsic values and extrinsic values when it comes to friendships?
Sure. So think of it like this. In the early stages of a friendship, what usually draws us to someone are those extrinsic values, the things we can easily see and connect with. It might be shared hobbies, taste in music,
Hmm.
even just having a similar sense of humor. Those are like the initial sparks.
Right, like those things we bond over when we first meet someone.
Exactly. But as we get to know someone better and the friendship deepens, that's when the intrinsic values start to matter more. These are the beliefs we hold about things like honesty, loyalty, integrity, our fundamental views on what's right and wrong, what truly matters in life.
So just to be clear, you're saying that if, let's say, I really value honesty above all else, but my friend, tends to bend the truth a little, that difference could become a big issue down the line.
Exactly. And that's what our sources really emphasize. When those extrinsic attractions start to fade, maybe you're not into the same band anymore, or your interests change if you don't have those shared intrinsic values. Those differences can become deal breakers. It's like you might have bonded over a certain band, but what happens when that band breaks up? Or, maybe you discover that you have totally different political views. Those deeper level differences, they can create real tension.
It's like building a house on sand versus building it on solid rock. You know,
Hmm.
the shared interests, those might be fun for a while, but
Hmm.
without that bedrock of shared values, it can all crumble pretty quickly.
That's a perfect analogy. And it's not just about friendships either, is it? I mean, our sources even mention how this dynamic plays out in romantic relationships too.
Yeah, that's so true. It makes you wonder, how often do relationships, both friendships and romantic relationships, fall apart, not because of those superficial differences, but because those core values are misaligned.
Right, because at the end of the day, when those initial sparks of attraction fade, you're left with who that person truly is and what they stand for. And if those fundamental values don't align, well, that's when things get really tricky.
Absolutely. This whole conversation reminds me of something else from our sources. They talk about the Fearless Girl statue, that one facing down the Wall Street Bull. And the sculptor, Kristen Visbal, she describes Fearless Girl as a beacon for diversity.
Oh, yeah, fearless girl. That's a powerful image.
It is. But I'm curious, how does this statue, even one as powerful as Fearless Girl, how does it tie into this whole conversation about values and friendships?
Well, at first glance, fearless girl might seem like a bit of a jump from friendships, but it actually makes a really profound point about intrinsic values. See, that statue, despite all the controversy surrounding it, embodies a powerful intrinsic value. the belief in gender equality.
Now that you mention it, I see the connection. It's like, just as Fearless Girl is challenging the status quo, maybe real friendship also demands that we be a little bit fearless, to be willing to step outside our comfort zones and embrace those differences, but all the while staying grounded in those shared core values.
Exactly. Visible even describes Fearless Girl as a symbol of progress, something that can drive real change. And strong friendships, they're kind of like that statue. They stand firm, unwavering in their commitment to those shared values, even when things get tough.
So if we're trying to wrap our heads around all of this, what's the big takeaway here? It sounds like it all comes down to being really mindful of those deeper level values when we're building and nurturing our friendships.
Absolutely. It's not to say that common interests aren't important, because of course they're part of the equation, but they shouldn't be the only thing holding the friendship together. Before you really invest in a friendship, it's worth asking yourself, do our core beliefs align? Are we both heading in the same direction? Taking a moment to think about your values and how they match up with a potential friend's values could save you a lot of heartache down the road.
That's such good advice. It's like, just as Fearless Girl stands as a symbol of this unyielding value, our friendships, they should also be rooted in something deeper than, just liking the same music or having the same hobbies. Think about your closest friends. What are those shared intrinsic values that have kept your bond so strong? Now, that's something worth pondering.
Food for thought, for sure.